James here with the Oracle Outlook for the week starting June the 3rd, 2019. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining me for this week's video reading. As I always say, I am so happy to have you here with me. This week I wanted to work with Lenormand, and I'm working with one of two new decks in my collection. This week the deck that's assisting me is the Sienna Lenormand, and it is by Lynn Boyle, and I will be leaving a link in the description box below so you can learn more about the deck. And as I always say, if you fancy it and you want to acquire it for your collection, you'll know just how you can do that. So again, I'm working with the Sienna Lenormand, and now that I've set things up, let's now get to the table and take a look at the cards that are going to be making up this week's video reading. And here we are with the cards on the table, and before getting into the shuffling and the dealing of the cards, I just wanted to take a moment to share with some of you who might find this interesting. Every now and again I get people who ask me why I choose to add certain decks to my collection. So I thought in this particular case, because this particular Lenormand deck kind of sets itself apart from most decks in my opinion, and this is why. Most times for me personally, when I'm looking for a Lenormand deck, one of the boxes for me that it has to tick is that I'd like to get a deck that has at least 2 gentleman cards and 2 lady cards. And the thing that makes this deck unique is that this one had 3 for me to choose from when I got it. So these are the 3 woman cards. So I'm going to show you these. And the reason why I like to have additional gentleman and lady cards, or in this case man and woman cards, is because I tend to do a lot of same-sex readings. And so that is why that is very important to me. So like I said, this deck came with 3. So this is the one of the woman cards. Actually, this is the one that I don't use, so I put this one aside. Now, it came down to these 2 for my choices for if I'm reading for a lesbian couple or about a lesbian relationship. So I use these 2. But when I'm working with it for myself, I choose the woman in my right hand. So this is my alternative woman card, but this is my woman card that stays in the deck. There's something about this particular image that I like. And then here's the thing about the men cards. So I'm going to hold them up next. So here we have the 3 men cards. And so this is the one that I use to represent me for obvious reasons, right? So, but I love this because don't see too many decks that have diverse cultures represented in the gentleman or the lady cards. So this was a highlight for me in getting this deck. When I saw this particular man, I'm like, ooh, I have to have that. The only other deck that I have that has what I would call representation, for me, is my very first Lenormand deck, which is the Under the Roses Lenormand. And if you're familiar with that deck, it has African gentleman cards and European gentleman cards, and then you get to pick based on your race which card you feel represents you. So this for me is my card. So when I'm working with the deck for myself, this always represents me. And for this week's reading, because of that, I'm going to take him out. So he will not be a part of the deck. I will go with one of these 2, and more likely I will go with the gentleman in my left hand because the woman card that I use is facing left. So the gentleman would have to be facing right in order for that to work, right? So, but these are the 2 other ones. And so, again, I would use this gentleman if I was doing a same-sex reading, but I could also use the other one. It works either way. So, in this particular case, if it was a gay couple that was Caucasian, I would use these 2. But if it was maybe interracial, which is I just came to me, then I could use these 2. But anyway, so that is the reason for the deck choice in terms of me adding it to my collection. So now that I've done that, let's now take the gentleman cards that I'm going to be using for this week's reading and take the women and the extra men cards out. So these are the 2 that are going to be the gentleman and lady for this week's reading, and we're going to shuffle them into the deck. So what I'll do first is, just to make sure they're mixed in, I'll do this really quickly. My love over the hand. Just to make sure they're in there really good. Now I'll go ahead and go about my normal way of shuffling. So at this point, now that I'm shuffling, I'm focusing on my intention for these weekly general readings. And it's always the same, it's pretty consistent, that we are looking to the cards this week for advice, for guidance, for insight that could be helpful and beneficial as we move through the upcoming week. Alright, I'm feeling that's good. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut the cards like I do every week. Now we're going to fan the deck out. And now I'm looking for 6 cards that are getting my attention because I'm sticking with my pyramid spread. It's become very popular. 3, 4, 5, and we are looking for the 6th and final card. And I keep looking back over here at this one, so I'll take that one. So those are the 6 cards. Taking the remainder of the deck up, putting that to one side, and now I'm going to count back. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and that's to make sure that my counting at the beginning was on point. And so now at this point, so I have the cards, I'm going to lay the cards out. So if you're new, the pyramid spread gets laid out where the first card is going to represent the issue for the week. And then the next cards go underneath it, forming the second tier in the pyramid. And cards 2 and 3 go on opposite sides. And they become factors that are playing a role or a part in whatever the issue is being presented. And then the last 3 cards go at the bottom of the pyramid. They form the foundation, right? And then these cards are possibilities in terms of outcomes for the issue, right? So this could be how the issue could potentially play itself out, right? So now what I'm doing is I'm just taking a moment to look at the cards. I'm a recovering perfectionist, but one of these things when I'm doing these videos is that I'm always playing with the cards because I want them to kind of look as straight as possible. So, all right. So now that I have the cards laid out, I'm going to take a look at the issue card, setting things up. Our issue for the week is Mountain. So Mountain is a card that can represent blocks, challenges, and obstacles. So this could just represent, you know, things coming up that we have to kind of work around or work to overcome, right? Any kind of challenge, block, obstacles. For me, it's making me think of what I talked about in last week's reading because that actually happened to me, is that I had a lot of plans shifted and changed. If you remember, I talked about that with the combination of the Fortune Teller card and the Thoughts card. I used Kipper last week, and so those cards turned up, and one of the things that I had said was that if we were operating on a timetable or planning things, you know, that there were going to be things beyond our control, external factors, that were going to kind of shift our plans. And so I experienced a lot of that last week. I don't know about you, but I personally did. And so it made me think of that reading. So I'm getting that with this card because other meanings that I have for Mountain are setbacks, delays, and things being postponed, right? So it could just be a matter of those are going to be the challenges or the obstacles or the blocks that we have to work through. They may revolve around some kind of setback, some kind of delay, some kind of postponement, right? Mountain can also represent, it's known traditionally as the enemy card. So this could just be saying like those challenges, those blocks, those obstacles, those hurdles are quote unquote our enemies this week. So sometimes for me, when I talk about the idea about an enemy, sometimes this card can suggest that how are we our own worst enemies, right? And that there may be something that we need to do to overcome our own, own personal blocks, our own personal challenges, our own personal tendencies, those habits, tendencies, behaviors where we are our own worst enemy. So, for instance, I'll give an example. So, for instance, when I personally draw the mountain card, one of the challenges that I have is procrastination. So, since I'm saying that, one of the blocks, one of the challenges could be that you're working through your own sense of procrastination. That's the idea where we delay something or we push something off to another point in time, right? So it could be like if you're working through procrastination, if that resonates with you, then it could be that could be the thing that you have to work on overcoming this week. Again, mountain represents blocks, challenges, hurdles, obstacles. I personally see this as setbacks, delays, postponements, and one of the chief challenges for me personally is procrastination. So I sometimes see this as procrastination as well. So that's mountain. So now what we'll do is we'll take a look at the card on the left of mountain to see what possible factor is playing into this. So on the left side we have, isn't this funny? So I spent so much time talking about the men cards in this deck, and here we have the man card. So for some people, if you're a woman watching this video, there's going to be a man who's going to be factoring into some kind of challenge, block, or obstacle. He's going to play a role in whatever the setback may be, the delay, the postponement, right? Or that if you're a woman and you're identifying with the procrastination aspect of mountain, it could be that you are putting something off that may involve a man, right? So there is that. Now, if you're a man and you're watching this video, the man card would represent you. And so I'm letting myself off the hook this week because I showed you the man card that represents me, and this is not him. So for a man watching this video, it could be how are you playing a role or a part in the idea of a challenge, a setback, or some kind of delay, right? It would go back to what I said about the idea about you being your own worst enemy. So how is it that maybe in terms of a habit, a tendency, or a behavior that you are your own worst enemy, right? Now, another possibility here is that if there is something involving a man, then the mountain card would suggest maybe the challenge here is that there's distance or something remote, going with the idea like being in the mountains. The mountains are a distant location, a remote location, that kind of thing. So it could just represent this idea about somebody who is distant or remote, and that could be either in terms of a location, being in the mountains, literally, or that there's a sense of either how he comes across as maybe distant or remote. So those are some ways of looking at man and how he may be playing a part in the issue of mountain. So now let's see what's on the other side of man and mountain. That'll give us maybe some more insight or more information about this. So on the other side we have, okay, so here we have crossroads. So crossroads is a card that can represent choices. It can represent options. It could represent alternatives, right? So with the man card, on the other side of this card, it could suggest that there's a man who's going to be facing some kind of choice or a decision, right? Because he's looking that way, right? And that may be where the setback is, the delay is. There could be, I'm putting off making a decision, right? So there is that. Now, crossroads can also represent multiples of something. So it could also represent multiples of a man, right? More than one man. So that could be a challenge for someone. Maybe if there's a relationship, we're looking at this and saying that maybe there's a choice needing to be made about which man, right? And we're putting off that, right? So this could imply that there is a relationship going on where there's more than one party, and there's a decision needing to be made about who will be the best choice. Because for me, crossroads can represent not just a choice or a decision, but it's about choosing the best course, right? Choosing the best path to go down, right? So if we go with that as a possibility, then it's about, if there's more than one person, it's about choosing the best person, right? And it would be the person who wants to walk down the same road, crossroads, that you're walking down, right? But my first impulse is to go with the idea that there is a man who's facing a decision, needing to make a choice, and he's looking at his options. What are his options? What are his alternatives? Because he wants to make the best choice going forward, and that may require him to maybe not make the choice right away. That would be Mountain, right? He wants to give it some time, right? So there maybe there's a setback or a delay with the decision-making process, right? Or the challenge could be that there are too many options, too many alternatives, and that's playing a role in the decision-making process as well, right? So it could be too many choices. Because I'm going back to the idea about more than one person. I'm hearing a Samantha Fox song called Too Many People. So it could just be a matter of there's too many people involved in that process, right? But that's what I see with crossroads. Crossroads typically can represent, like I said, choices or decisions, options, alternatives. But it could also represent the road that we're traveling down in life, the path that we're on. You know, we're needing to make decisions about the best course, the best path, the best avenue, the best approach going forward. Right? So I'm seeing that. And I talked about this idea about decision making as I lay the cards down. What I'm seeing here, if I go here with man and mountain reading up this way, is what I usually do with the pyramid. Here we have a man facing a challenge, or a man being challenged, right? Being challenged with what? Being challenged with making a decision. You know, being challenged with his path in life. Because here, mountain and crossroads could be read as a challenge with making a choice or a decision. Right? Or the challenge of a path or an approach. Right? It could even be read as multiple challenges, right? So this could be a possibility here if we're talking about delays or setbacks or things being postponed. There may be more than one, right? Multiple setbacks, multiple delays, right? I talked about that earlier for myself with last week's reading. I didn't have just like one shift in my plans, you know, being changed or altered in terms of time. I had a number of them, so there could be a number of challenges being faced, right? So that's how I would look at these three cards. So now with that in mind, we have some context. Let's take a look at the bottom three cards to see how these could play out, right? So with the card on the bottom left, we have, you cannot make this stuff up. Oh my goodness. Okay, so now here we have the woman card, right? And it's just so funny, and I say, not funny, haha, but funny, ironic, or like a cosmic wink from the universe, is because I spent so much time talking about the reason for the choice for the deck in terms of my collection, and going on about the men and woman cards. And look at this. Now we have the woman card, right? So just like I talked about with the man, if you're a woman and you're watching this, she represents you, right? And if you're a man watching this, then here we have, you know, a woman who's significant to you, right? And the interesting thing about it here is that as one of the outcomes, it's saying like the outcome rests with a woman, right? But here's the interesting thing in terms of the dynamic. If I put the card back down, now we see here, remember now I took some time reading the up here, right? So now here we have a woman and a man are having a challenge, right? Or a man and a woman are having a block or an obstacle or some kind of setback, right? And here's the interesting thing. If we go with the picture of the cards, if I go like this, you'll see the visual. Look at this when we have the visual. We have the man and the woman, and they're not facing each other. That can symbolically represent a disagreement. We're not seeing eye to eye. You know, we don't have each other's backs, that kind of thing, right? And so maybe that's maybe partly playing into the idea about a choice or a decision, that he's facing a choice because he's having a challenge in this relationship with a woman, right? They've gotten to a place in their relationship where now they're having some kind of setback, some kind of challenge, some kind of obstacle that they have to overcome. And he's faced with making a decision about that, possibly. Now, if we go with the idea about multiple men, like I talked about here, right, multiples of men, then a woman is faced with that, right? And so maybe she has to decide, she's the one who's on the deciding end here, or has a deciding factor into which of the men will be the best man for her going forward, right? But I find it very interesting that we have both the man and the woman cards in the reading this week, right? And again, where they're placed, right? So now she has her back to this card, so it'll be very interesting to see what this card is. So let's take a look at that now. So here we have Park. Okay, so Park is known as garden, and this card represents other people. Wow. So we have a situation in which she's maybe struggling with, because I tend to look at cards that are behind the person as something that they may be struggling with. So this may be something of a nature where we're struggling with other people. There's a struggle with other people. There's a struggle with something being public, because this card can represent the public. It represents social. It represents communities, right? And for me, one of the things could be, too, that this card represents the outdoors. So I play on that with it representing nature. And so with her back to this card, it could represent the woman is walking away from other people, or she's leaving some kind of group or community, that kind of thing. Or that the challenge for her is allowing herself to be who she is, what's natural to her, right? Because of this. Right, so that's very interesting. So there's something here having to do with other people. Other people may be weighing into the decision-making process, right? So this is other people, a group or community, something being public or something being social. Wow. Okay, so now let's take a look at the final card, rounding the pyramid out. And here we have fish. Okay, so fish is a card that can, just like crossroads, represent multiples of something. But my chief meaning for the fish card is that it can represent money. It's a money and finance card, right? So if it's so this may be a situation where money is involved, right? And so if we put the card down, then here we have, if we're reading the cards down this way, then here we have a challenge or a setback or a delay with a decision that involves money, right? So money could be factoring into the situation here, right? Now, the other thing that strikes me with this card, Park, being about other people, this card has a playing card insert of the King of Diamonds. So here we have a man, and as I'm noticing, I'm also noticing that we have with the crossroads the Queen of Diamonds. So here we have the King and Queen of the same suit. So that usually implies, a married couple. And on the other side of that, we have the man and the woman card, right? So there's this continuing message about other people, about a group of people being involved. So there may be, two couples. We have a couple here. We have a couple here. Right? And so there may be something involving a situation between the two parties. We have one party on this side, one party on this side, needing to work it out. And it may be something of a financial nature, or there may be finances are playing a role or a part in that, right? If we go with the foundation here, then this is, what is maybe at the root of the problem is that it has to do with money. But this is interesting this week. I'm fascinated with this. Okay, the other thing with fish is that fish can represent flow and circulation. So if we go with the idea that this is about the public, about being social, about a group or community, for the woman, there may be a challenge for her. Remember, this is behind her, so this may be what she's struggling with. She's struggling with circulating in social circles, right? If we go with the idea about this is about circulation, so there's something about that for her. That's a challenge, right? Because again, this card can represent flow and circulation because the idea about fish being in water. And as I just said, that idea about fish being in water, maybe she's feeling like she's a fish out of water, right, in her social circles, right? And so that could just be a matter of maybe kind of re-examining the group or the community that she is trying to be a part of. And if it's a challenge, maybe she's just with the wrong group of people. It's popping into my head the idea of when our parents used to tell us that we were hanging out with the wrong crowd. I don't know if anybody ever experienced that. I didn't really have that as a challenge. It was more my brother, if I confess that. My mom was always concerned about who my brother was hanging out with, right? So, the idea about hanging out with the wrong crowd. So there could be like somebody may need to make a choice about walking away from certain people because they may be the wrong crowd, right? So I'm seeing that. Now, sometimes what we can do here is we can take a look at the issue card and link it to the middle card of the foundation, right? So here we have mountain and park. So here we have a challenge, setback, or delay with something public, something social. Park in that regard can be a public venue or a social event. So there may be something having to do with a social event that is experiencing some kind of challenge. There's going to be some kind of delay, obstacle, setback with that. Maybe even an event that's going to be postponed, right? And then that would make sense as to why so many people or so many people cards are in the deck this week, because it's going to affect more than just one person, right? So, and that's also partly too maybe why the money card is here, because the money may be a part of that too, right? So again, I found this reading to be very interesting this week. And so on that note, I'm going to go ahead and end things here. This has been the Oracle Outlook for this week. I am James Himm Mitchell, and as I wrap up, I'd like to thank you for sharing space here with me for this week's reading, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next reading together. So until then, I'm hoping that you have a wonderful day, and I'm hoping that you have a wonderful week, one that doesn't have too many setbacks and delays. Take care.